welcome to Served Up. This podcast is where hospitality meets leadership and where we take an honest look at the business of beverage. I'm Bridget Albert. I've spent my career building cocktail programs, mentoring rising talent, judging competitions, and advocating for women in our industry. I'm joined by my co-host, Eric Heemer, one of only 5 people in the world to hold both the Master Sommelier and Master of Wine titles. His depth of knowledge and global perspective brings tremendous insight to every conversation. This is Served Up.
Welcome to Served Up. This is Eric, going solo today. My co-host Bridget has the day off. My guest is Kristina Kelley, the Executive Director for the Washington State Wine Commission, which represents every licensed winery and wine grape grower in Washington State. The mission of the commission is to drive growth of Washington wine through marketing, communications, and viticulture and enology research. Kristina's a wine industry veteran, previously with E&J Gallo Winery for over 25 years in sales, marketing, PR, and communications. Kristina has strong ties to the Pacific Northwest, having worked in Washington 2 different times in her career, and she owns a vineyard in Oregon's Dundee Hills wine-growing region. So, relax, pour a glass of Washington State wine if you can, and enjoy the conversation. Kristina, welcome to the show.
Oh, Eric, thanks so much for having me here today. I appreciate it.
It's our pleasure, indeed. So before we dive into Washington wine, because that's our main topic of conversation, we'd love to learn a little bit about our guest's background. So tell us, how did you end up in this wonderful business of wine?
When I was 17 years old, I went to babysit my cousins in Lago de Garda. My mother's Dutch. Her sister and my uncle, every summer, they went there. And I first went to Suave and Bardolino, and that was it. So 17, going into my senior year of high school. And so when I decided for college is to really focus on hospitality, and that didn't last very long because I gravitated towards the beverage portion of hospitality. And from there, I went into working with distributor sales, worked with a broker, and then I spent time with the Fetzer family before they were purchased by Brown-Forman, really working in the sales arm of it. And then went to work for a very large family-owned company based in California, and that was the Gallo family. Oh, yeah. And spent 25 years there working with on marketing, communications, PR. But at the same time, my husband had a vineyard up in Oregon. So I am a Washingtonian, or somebody from the Northwest, so I felt like I understood sort of the grower side of it, and then I also stood, the business side of it. And so when this opportunity came for me to become part of the Washington State Wine Commission, it was a really wonderful opportunity for me to move back home, close to my daughter, to my mom. And it's just been really incredible experience for me representing Washington State.
Yeah, that's great. What kismet, huh?
Yeah, it is.
Very nice. So let's talk a little bit about Washington. Despite being the second largest wine-growing state in the country after California, with over 1,000 wineries, I believe, or over 1,000.
Yeah, we say licensees.
Yeah, yep. Licensees, of course. I still feel that Washington doesn't quite get the recognition and respect that it deserves from trade and consumers alike. Can you comment a little on this?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's important to know about Washington State is 90% of our wineries make 5,000 cases or less. So we don't have the critical mass really outside of the Pacific Northwest. And while we are producing some absolutely incredible wines that are diverse, not only in style, but from appellation to varietal, a lot of those wines are available just in our own backyard. And so I think really focusing on how do we get more of those wines outside of Washington State, hopefully will impact the way people perceive our industry. And it's something we're very committed to doing.
Yeah, I'm sure. Because the wines are so wonderful. And when you visit the regions throughout the state, and you realize there's so much diversity.
Yep.
Even, dare I say it, maybe even more diversity than California has in terms of, European varieties that just don't grow as well in California. So it's heartening. I remember once talking to Bob Betts, MW, who's, of course, one of the pioneers of Washington wine. He had just finished giving us a wonderful seminar, and people were applauding and clapping how great it was, the diversity of Washington's wines. And some guy comes up and says, I just have one more question. What side of the Potomac are the vineyards on?
Well, this is a true story. I did an event in London last April with the state of Washington tourism. And we did this whole fabulous luncheon with Washington wines and images of Washington State. When the article printed, the image asset that they used was a picture of the United States Capitol.
Oh, my God. Bob Betts was just, duh. You know?
Yes,
so first thing we have to do is convince, this is Washington State, not Washington, D.C.
And what we like to say is, Washington State is the Pacific Northwest in every bottle. And I think grounding ourselves first in the Pacific Northwest and giving us that sense of place and then moving into Washington really helps people understand Washington State. And what's interesting is when we are outside of the United States, when we're working in an export market, you will see Washington and Oregon together in all the various trade fairs. And that's how we present ourselves outside of the United States, as these two wine growing states together. Because we grow, we do grow a little bit of Pinot Noir, but we're predominantly, Cab, Syrah, Merlot, Cab Franc. There's very little Pinot that's planted in our state. And we find there's some really nice synergy in our international markets to link those two states together.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's, the old saying, a rising tide floats all ships is really apropos here. And we'll talk a little bit later about how BC is going to be getting into the act, too. And
and don't forget, we have AVAs that are in Washington and in Oregon.
And Oregon, that's right.
So Walla Walla crosses.
Absolutely.
It crosses the Columbia.
Makes perfect sense to me. So let's shift gears and talk a little bit about increasing market share for Washington, I should say premium market share for Washington. So tell us about the 5-year plan.
Yeah, one of the first things I did, and I will be 2 years with the Wine Commission in the beginning of May. So one of the first things I did was really take a look at our strategy and our 5-year plan, writing it out to really think about what are the future needs of our state and how do we continue to drive the growth of Washington State wine. And I think what's important to know is we aren't a membership organization. People don't pay dues. We represent all wineries, and we also represent all growers within our state, so 400 growers. So as we started looking at our strategic plan, what is the purpose of our commission? And really the mission is, to drive the growth of Washington State wine via marketing communications and enology and viticulture research, because that's an important part of what we do as well. And so using those strategic pillars, we really started saying, okay, what are the things that we can impact? And so for us, when we talk about marketing, how do we market to trade? How do we market to our wholesalers? Because what we were finding, if we were to really focus on consumer marketing, consumers couldn't find our wine in store. They couldn't find our wine within a wholesale network. And so by pivoting and saying, we're going to reach the customer via an on-premise account versus a retail account with our wholesalers, we felt that was really the right choice to move into that and to do some focus on that and help our wines get out of the state. At the same time, also focusing on the work that we're doing in our local market. So we looked at that. We also looked at how are we having conversations with our constituents, and we do call them constituents. I'm part of Washington State Department of Agriculture. I don't think I ever really thought myself being in government, but I am.
Here you are.
So really making sure as we think about the work that we're doing for our constituent that we're keeping their needs front and center. So while we may be focusing on how do we get out to trade, how do we get out to wholesalers, how do we give the tools to our wineries that their business may be done through D2C, may be done through tasting rooms, may only be done, in a 50-mile radius of Seattle. So really trying to make sure we had something in there for every size of our wineries and to make sure that through research, we are providing the tools necessary for our growers so they could also see the value in the work that we're doing as a commission.
Yeah, definitely. So a real from the ground up grassroots effort that you're making here.
Well, you have to. And so many of our wineries and growers, multi-generational families. I mean, we have growers in Eastern Washington that are 6 generations, and they've been farming first, apples and cherries and hops and now grapes. So, we have real people are farming, and they're farming a lot of different crops. And so making sure that we're listening to their needs, as also to the needs of our larger wineries to make sure we're giving them the tools to be able to distribute their wines and also grow their wines on an international basis.
Right. It's funny you should mention apples and cherries and hops, because I've often thought, everybody knows that Yakima Valley is great for apples and cherries, and, all of southeastern Washington is a literal fruit basket, full of. And I'm thinking, well, if apples can get distribution nationwide and cherries can get, everybody knows what a Rainier cherry is. Why can't Washington wines get that same recognition? Is there some way that agriculture could be packaged together and marketed that way?
Yeah. The Washington State Department of Agriculture is working on an initiative that's sort of a branding initiative across all agriculture. We don't have, if you have California grown, that's all the agricultural products. We don't have that within our agriculture sort of programming. And so that's something that they're working on. And I work really closely with the Apple Commission, the Cherry, Tree Fruit Commission, to really think how we can synergize between what we're doing with wine, what we're doing with hops, what we're doing with other, fruits, to really make sure that we're all keeping in touch and trying to leverage each other's network and each other's opportunities that we can. Plus, I'm the only commission that I can provide wine. So
you're the popular one at the party.
So I get invited to a lot of these so our wines can be showcased.
What have you brought, Kristina?
Yeah.
And of course, wine being a controlled substance in the United States makes it a little more difficult.
It does make it more difficult.
Definitely. But I think there's, I could see cross-merchandising in retail accounts, display of apples and cherries, and here's Washington.
Don't forget our shellfish, our salmon.
Oh, well, but of course. That's the seafood department.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking produce now here. Anyway, let's move on. So on a less happy note, in recent years, all of California and the Pacific Northwest has been plagued with wildfires, resulting in a lot of smoke-tainted fruit. What has your commission done to address this problem, or are you doing it to mitigate the problem in the future?
Well, Washington State University was the first university to begin smoke impact research, and that dates back to 2016. We have an incredible, through that university, Dr. Tom Collins, who is really probably the expert in smoke impact. And our commission actually really provided the resources with our industry to build the Viticulture and Enology Center at Washington State University. That part of Washington State University was built by our industry. And so our commission, we provide funding for a lot of the different research that goes on. So I have a Washington Research Advisory Committee. We look at proposals that come up from WSU. We work across the industry to say what are the things that are most important to our growers and to our wineries. And we fund smoke impact research every single year. So doing trials in, hoop houses with different smoke to see the impact of it. We look at how to mitigate when we do know that there's smoke, what varieties are more receptive to smoke impact. But we're also doing work around freeze. If you think about, we had an incredible freeze last January. What is the guidance and research that we can do to help mitigate some of those risks as well? But, we work hand in hand with our land-grant university, and the results have been fantastic. Washington State University has Dr. Jean Dodson, who came up from Cal Poly to run the V&E program, and she's done just a remarkable job, and I think it's been a great partnership between our industry and the university.
Right. Well, it's a great resource to have. So you sort of segued into the next topic, staying on climate change as the topic. Let's talk about frost-related fruit damage and smaller harvests and the impact economically, and what you're trying to do in tandem with working with BC, that sort of thing. Some Washington growers recently have too much fruit. They've lost some contracts and haven't been able to sell the product. So working with your counterparts in British Columbia, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of the things that we had in January, because Washington also had a freeze. Fortunately, the impact for us was minimal. A little bit in Walla Walla, a little bit of Syrah, I think some Cab Franc, but overall, we were not impacted by the freeze. Unfortunately, our neighbors up north in BC were impacted quite severely, in so much as I think they lost their entire harvest for 2024 and are still assessing some of the long-term issues they may have within the vineyards.
Do you know if this was throughout BC or Similkameen?
It's pretty much
everywhere.
It's pretty much everywhere. So you may know Canada is the number one export market for Washington State wine. I think there's a good familiarity, but we didn't have a lot of our wines there, and we didn't have a lot of BC wines in Washington State. So working with BC wine growers, working with U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington State Department of Agriculture, working with Washington wine growers, we quickly put together information on what fruit was available in Washington, how wine can get across the border, and really kind of put together, I want to call it a dating service, where we posted on the site, these are the grapes available, connecting BC wineries with Washington growers. And that was really done through Washington wine growers, and the commission helped aid in any other information that they may need. And so I remember the first call that I got as harvest was kicking off, and this must have been the first week of September, and I got a call from somebody who had purchased grapes, and they said, Kristina, it only took us 2 minutes to get over the border with fruit.
Wow.
That was a huge, because we were all sweating, okay, we have this program, are they going to be able to get across the border? And they were, and BC really did a great job of communicating to their wineries. And so I think we sold somewhere about 4,500 to 5,000 tons of Washington State fruit across the industry, everywhere from Syrah from Walla Walla to Cabernet from the Chelan AVA. So really across the board. And so now what we're working on is looking at all the labels. So a lot of the whites are being bottled. So we're seeing the labels, making sure that they are compliant with our labeling regulations, working with BC to capture the information that those wineries need to know on how that they're being labeled. And feedback I've gotten from our BC wineries has all been positive on the fruit, the quality of the fruit. We hope that we can continue to assist them as they reevaluate, their vineyard holdings. But the plus side of it is those wineries were able to produce wine in 2024. They were able to keep their employees. They were able to keep their cellar staff on using our grapes. And I think it's a really important part of our industry. I think wine is a collaborative industry. It's about relationships, about building long-term relationships. And I think, it helped us with some of our oversupply. But I think more importantly, it helped keep that industry going at a time when, they're facing a lot of uncertainties.
Yeah, indeed. Truly a win-win.
And I haven't tried the wines yet. So I'm going up. I'm going to go up in early May, and I'm going to visit a lot of the wineries that we've worked with and go through and taste the whites as they release the whites. So yeah,
I'd be curious to follow up with you and find out, because I know the Vintners Quality Alliance of EQA in Canada has regulations just like we do here on geographical labeling. So I'd be curious to see how they are able to label those wines.
Yeah, I've got some great examples. Yeah. I'm more than happy to share.
We've got a few Canadian MWs here too, so I'll see if we can get some wine sent down to Florida soon. So
I know a lot of the producers who are making, because I've been working with them, so I'm happy to follow up on that with you.
Great. Well, thank you. So let's shift gears again and talk about Washington's AVAs. When I first started in the business, I believe there was just the three. There was Yakima, Walla Walla, and Columbia Valley, and now we have 21, I believe.
Yeah, we just had our 21st AVA just a few months ago, Beverly AVA, which is actually a very small AVA, but it's actually our warmest AVA. And I think one of the things that you see with Washington State is there's such a diversity in our, in terms of elevation, in terms of soils. And Beverly just was an AVA. There's just a few wineries and vineyards in there, but they felt that there was something different about this AVA that really warranted it to move forward because of its warmth, because of its soil types, because of the fact it was sitting right by Wailuke Slope, Royal Slope. It sort of came to be its own AVA. And I suspect there will be others, but that was our 21st AVA. It was Beverly.
Wow. Do you happen to know what the square acreage is?
I can find out for you. I don't know it offhand. And I will get back to you on that, and we can circle back on a square. I think it's just something around 2,000, but I will confirm that with you.
That's not that small. There are smaller.
I don't think there's that much that's planted.
Probably not. Yeah. Just so plantable acreage. Okay. Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, that's exciting. Yeah. I just have a couple more questions,
yes.
Or not even questions for you. Let's hear a little bit about. If we're going down in the elevator, down the first floor again, you got 30 seconds to pitch me on Washington wine. What would you say with all the vinous diversity that Washington has to offer?
I think there's something very special about the people in Washington State and about our growers and our wineries. We don't think of ourselves as, we're Walla Walla, we're Red Mountain, we're all Washington State. And I think that is really one of the most inspirational things I feel is the sense of community and the collaboration amongst all of our growers and our vintners. I think what has, I don't want to say it surprised me, but what's been just so remarkable is the quality of the wines. Whether I'm having a Cabernet from Red Mountain, or I'm in Walla Walla and I'm having a Syrah from the Rocks, or I could be in Horse Heaven Hills and maybe I'm having Riesling or Sauvignon Blanc, I will tell you that there is that theme of quality that exists across all of our wines. We grow everything from Ribolla Gialla in Walla Walla to, Cab Franc, to Cabernet, to Semillon. And so I think we are diverse. But we also do it, I think, at a price that I hate to say affordable, but I think for people to find diversity at a price that they can still go and have a glass of wine, have a wine that they can afford, I think that's something that will suit very well as we bring new consumers and new generations into wine. I also feel that, we are a state that we have everything we need. We have the sunlight. We've got, the diurnal shifts. We've got incredible warm days, cool nights, which I know can sound cliche, but we really do. And we have water.
More so than California.
Yeah, and we have water. We have the Columbia River. And so when I think people think of Washington State, they think of Seattle and wet and green. Well, you go over that cascade and you're in high desert. And so we have the benefit of that Columbia to provide water for our vineyards. So there's so much to discover. And it's also a beautiful state. I think, to me, part of why I love wine is the stories, the people, why a wine region would be different. And I think you go to Washington, it feels like you're somewhere different.
Yeah.
It feels like there's this incredible sense of place with wonderful people. And then you try the wines, and I'm really excited that I have this role with the Washington State Wine Commission.
It sounds like a wonderful position to have, and certainly lots of challenges ahead, but it's really seems like it's the culmination of your whole career. You've been working towards this.
Isn't it fun that I get to do that?
Yeah,
I mean, to me, it's, I always think we talk a lot about people building their careers. There's resources, your network, your allies, you're starting your career. But I think there's something very rewarding as you end your career to be able to take all that information and do something that really will help an industry and to help promote an industry. So I'm extremely excited. And I will also say, we also have an incredible team at the Washington State Wine Commission, some wonderful people that work on behalf of our state.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today, Kristina.
You're welcome.
It's been really nice talking to you.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of our future Served Up episodes. Cheers.